she is now one of the most famous and recognizable faces in the world of music, having had huge success within Girls Aloud, one of Britain's most decorated girl bands.
Girls Aloud's success as a band was crucial for Cheryl Cole to then use that as a launchpad to be a huge solo star. They are the biggest UK girl band ever.
And going on to become an international sensation as a solo artist.
When you see Cheryl Cole perform, from the outfits, the military-style outfits, to the dancers behind her, it looks funky and it looks cool.
Cheryl Cole is on her way to becoming a global icon.
Cheryl's actually had quite a bit of longevity in her fame, and she would walk onto the front page of the paper even now, 10 years after Girls Aloud's careers.
Cheryl had a natural talent from the minute she was born. She was a born performer. From the outset, she was always determined to make her way in the showbiz industry.
Possessing the drive and ambition that saw her and her bandmates come in second place on Simon Cowell's hit show, Pop Stars The Rivals. To breaking through on the international music scene, she is without a doubt one of the biggest names in the music industry today. This is her incredible story. The rise of Cheryl Cole has been nothing short of phenomenal. The lady from Newcastle is adjudged to be worth an astonishing £12 million. And the multi-award-winning star has acquired a global fan base of millions. Her videos on YouTube have collectively received over 150 million hits. And her first solo single, Fight For This Love, was the UK's fastest-selling single of 2009. But how did it all begin for one of England's most cherished stars?
Cheryl's early family life was pretty humble. She lived in an area that was half working class, half middle class. She was very much part of the working class row of council houses.
Cheryl's roots were really underprivileged. There was no airs and graces. She was definitely not born with a silver spoon in her mouth. It was very humble, and she was happy. She didn't have an unhappy childhood, but she was very aware she didn't have a necessary route to showbiz. She had to try hard for it.
Cheryl by no means had an easy upbringing. It was working class. She was loved. She had a mother and father who weren't married but loved her very much. It was pretty tough for her.
Throughout her younger years, Cheryl was unfortunately surrounded by a world of drugs and drug abusers. And by her own admission, it was a world that could have easily engulfed her.
Well, she grew up in a suburb of Walker, and a lot of the people around there got into drugs, quite heavy drug use. There was a lot of heroin users, there was some cocaine users, and Cheryl grew up surrounded by that. And she has said in the past she had a close call where she could have gone down a route of becoming a drug addict. She could have turned to cocaine, but she didn't, and it was actually some of her experiences with some of her close friends that turned her against drugs, and she had a very, very anti-drug stance.
Despite this anti-drug stance and her best efforts, Cheryl could do nothing but watch as she saw the lives of those closest to her deeply affected by drugs.
Cheryl's half-brother actually sniffed glue when she was young, and she talks about the times when she would be peering out the window at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, just wanting him to come home, being full of worry, and when he did come home, the place would stink of glue. And she says that even now, 30 years old, she smells glue and it kind of turns her stomach.
She has really tried to change him, and she offered to pay for him to go to rehab. She wanted to get him on the straight and narrow, and it's quite difficult for her because she's never gone down that route to see these people that she loved destroying themselves. And Andrew in particular, it's a constant reminder for her. Some of the closest people to her are going through such a painful experience and she can't do anything against it.
One of Cheryl's childhood friends, John, lost his life through drug abuse, and she says she couldn't go to the funeral. She was so upset. She didn't want to see her friend at the time in a coffin. And I think that probably did two things to Cheryl. It probably made her see she didn't want to go down that route. Not that she was really ever involved with drugs, but she was quite a bad girl. She was suspended from school. She swore on the school bus. And I also think that it made her very ambitious, just to think, no, that's a line I don't want to take, and I want to take a completely different route.
Things were about to get much harder for Cheryl, as at the tender age of just 11, she found out her parents were splitting up, and it turned her world upside down.
Cheryl was 11 when her parents split up, And it was a really difficult time for her. I mean, it's difficult for any child when their parents split up. But for Cheryl, she found out that her 3 older brothers and sisters weren't actually her biological siblings. That's a terrifying thing for a child to go through. And it kind of turned her world upside down.
You can imagine it was quite ideal having her life with the mum and the dad and the 2 brothers and the sister. Then that's all torn apart because her mum and dad are no longer together. And she said that it was really hard for her, not only that they split up, but also that her half 2 brothers and half sister, she found out, were not full-blooded because they had a different father.
Despite her turbulent upbringing, it was apparent from a very young age that Cheryl was an extremely talented and creative youngster.
Cheryl had a natural talent from the minute she was born. She won a Bonnie Baby competition, which just shows that she was even an attractive child. She then signed up to an agency, and it was obviously something that she wanted to do, as well as her mum encouraging her to do it. She had dance lessons. She was a born performer. She got a lot of agency work. She got a lot of modelling work. She was in a couple of adverts. And yeah, from the outset, she was always determined to make her way in the showbiz industry.
Cheryl was a natural performer, but quite importantly, she looked really good as a wee baby. So when she was entered into the Bonnie Babies contest by her mum, she won. Then her mum signed her up to the Pat Morgan modelling agency, and actually the work really rolled in. What mum doesn't think that their baby can be signed up to an agency is beautiful, but Cheryl really did get the offers coming in.
Despite winning many modelling competitions as a youngster, Cheryl's first and strongest passion was dance.
I actually think it's dancing that set her apart from the rest of Girls Aloud, because she had a strong passion for it when she was growing up. She took a lot of dance lessons. She was a ballet dancer. That went straight through into when the Girls Aloud girls decided to start looking in different directions. Dance was what attracted Cheryl. She immediately started street dancing. I think that's because that was what she had a really strong passion for when she was growing up.
Cheryl was modelling, she was on TV adverts, but she showed a real talent for dancing. And obviously we see that now. But when she was young, she took part in competitions. She even got as far as making nationwide competitions. She got to the finals of the UK Championship. And she was really, really good, and you can't take that away from her. So often with manufactured pop bands, you say, oh well, it was handed to them on a plate. No, if you look back to when Cheryl was a young teenager, she was a great mover.
Cheryl achieved lots as a youngster, and along with her skill and ambition, there was another key driving force behind her early success.
Cheryl's mother, Joan, has always been very determined for Cheryl to succeed. I think that's born out of a desire for Cheryl to do better than she did. She's always said she wants Cheryl to do better, and I think that's why their bond is so strong. Cheryl always wants her mum to enjoy everything that she enjoys as well, and Joan always wants the best for her. While she might have pushed her in that direction, I think it's a direction that Cheryl wanted to go in.
And what you can't downplay here is that Cheryl's mum, Joan, really was ambitious for Cheryl and her family. She wanted them to be on telly and modelling, and it wasn't just about the extra cash it would bring in for the family, although that was a big thing because they sometimes struggled. But she wanted Cheryl to have a way out and see there was more to life.
Cheryl's hard work and dedication as a youngster appeared to be paying off, as she was scouted by a huge management company, giving her a taste for success.
By the time Cheryl was 13, she was also signed up to a huge management agency called AIM, who talent spotted her, and the gigs came flying in. Now this must have been great for Cheryl, of course, because it gave her a taste of things to come, but also Joan, who had really seen the fruits of her labour pay off, pushing this wee girl since she was a tiny baby into Bonnie Baby contests, right up until now. She was appearing in front of huge crowds, between 150 to 1,000 people very regularly, and this gave her a taste, a real taste of what fame would be like. She got the buzz, she wanted more of it, and again that's partly why she became so successful, because she had that taste throughout her teenage years.
This early success led Cheryl to appear on hit TV talent show Pop Stars The Rivals, and it was the first time the public got a glimpse of the star in the making.
Girls Rivals is one of the first, or in fact the first, Saturday night primetime reality music show, and kick-started the likes of the X Factor, but it was also where we saw Cheryl Cole and Girls Aloud making their first ever TV appearances.
Popstars The Rivals is like today's X Factor or Pop Idol, but it came before that. And the thinking was to get 2 groups together, so get your best 5 girls as the winners, best 5 boys, and make them into rival pop groups. You had Girls Aloud, who became the biggest UK girl band ever.
So instead of creating one band, the canny producers decided to create 2. And they wanted a girl band and a boy band. And they wanted to pit them against each other in a run-up for Christmas #1. Cheryl joined, auditioned for the girl band and made it through.
Cheryl had to audition in front of names such as Louis Walsh, Jerry Halliwell and Pete Waterman. 3 huge names within the music industry, and it was an audition that would change her life forever.
Have you ever loved and lost somebody? Wish there was a chance to say I'm sorry. Can't you see? That's the way I feel about you and me, baby. Have you ever felt your heart was breaking?
You look exotic.
Have
Yeah.
the most beautiful eyes and skin I think I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, thank you very much. Get through. I'm through.
Cheryl successfully made it through to the next round. But was her success due to her good looks rather than musical merit?
In 2002, when Cheryl auditioned for Popstars The Rivals, she sang S Club 7's Have You Ever? And it was a great performance, but one of the judges, Pete Waterman, was more taken by her looks. He said that she had the most beautiful skin and eyes he'd ever seen. So, was he judging her more on her aesthetics? Maybe, but let's face it, he's the hitman behind Kylie Minogue and Jason Donovan. He knows you've got to have the whole package. She couldn't look like a model but be tone deaf, but the fact that she looked stunning absolutely helped her.
Cheryl Cole's first audition, she was this young teenage Geordie. She shyly tottered on, sang an S Club 7 song. She was wearing this kind of 1990s choker crucifix necklace, I remember, and her hair kind of slicked down, a world away from Cheryl Cole we know now. And Pete Waterman fell in love with her almost on the spot, basically said, are you just a pretty girl or are you here to stay? But she certainly impressed the 3 judges and, well, obviously the rest is history.
As the show progressed, it was clear that Cheryl was in her element. Showcasing her talent in front of large crowds was nothing new to her, and it was evident in her performances.
Cheryl made it to the final 10 girls, so she made it through boot camp on her own merits, whether it be looks, singing, ambition played an awfully big role. And when it came to the dancing sections, she really did excel.
Cheryl grew in confidence week in, week out as the show progressed, so did she. Her voice almost seemed to grow stronger and she seemed to thrive off the spotlight and definitely became more confident.
However, it wasn't all plain sailing for the soon-to-be star.
Cheryl didn't fare really easily throughout, so sometimes she found herself in the bottom 4. Once she found herself in the bottom 2, and she struggled. And I think that really made her realise how lucky she was to finally be chosen. But certainly it wasn't plain sailing for Cheryl Cole.
2 weeks consecutively, Cheryl was in the bottom 4 quite early on, which you would imagine would have knocked her confidence, but she performed well and sang off and didn't really look back after that.
Entering Popstars The Rivals was to be the pivotal milestone in launching Cheryl's career, forging a path for the star we recognise today. As she progressed through the show's stages, Cheryl was to become an integral part of the iconic girl band, Girls Aloud. And despite only being runners-up, their first single, Sound of the Underground, was a huge UK hit and went straight to #1.
Sound of the Underground was one of the first credible pop tracks for a long time, and I think it really made a marker for Girls Aloud. It was a great start. It set them off on a great start, and they didn't really look back after that. It was just, it couldn't have been a better single to kick off a pop career.
Sound of the Underground was a brilliant single. Now, 10 years later, it's still relevant. It could go in the charts and still sound very current.
Sound of the Underground was quite a cool, edgy song, unlike most pop show winners, which come out with some completely instantly forgettable cheesy ballad. This was a little bit different and slightly kind of grungier almost, and basically was a marker saying, yeah, we're Girls Aloud and we're here to stay.
sound of the underground proved to be a smash hit for Girls Aloud, and it was just the beginning for the UK's latest girl band. But it wasn't just pop lovers who were appreciating the #1 record.
And it wasn't, your big pop fans only who liked it. You had serious musical critics from broadsheet newspapers and magazines saying, no, actually, this is really good. It stayed at #1 for 4 weeks, it went platinum, and ultimately the critics loved it.
Many critics had stated that pop music in the early 2000s had become cheesy and bland. But with the introduction of Girls Aloud, it developed a much grittier and edgier sound.
What was so important for Girls Aloud was the fact that they had this gritty edge to them with Sound of the Underground. If you look at Hearsay or Will Young, who has gone on to become a bit more edgy and do his own things, they were very bland and cheesy and formulaic. So bands like Girls Aloud really shaped the early 2000s in terms of the music scene.
It seemed the arrival of Girls Aloud had filled a void within the pop music scene, as their instant popularity highlighted a need for a new exhilarating girl band. And there was another key factor behind their early success.
So for their first album, Girls Aloud had one of the biggest, most well-regarded teams behind them.
Having a producer like Brian Higgins, his companies Xenomania, who were also behind the Sugar Babes, was hugely important because it gives the girls credibility within the music industry, but also it just made their songs sound fresh and gritty and edgy and cool.
They had a proven track record, and it was a sign of intent that Girls Aloud were going to be around on the music scene for some time.
You add that to the Xenomania sort of hit writing and hit factory that the songs they were producing at the time, and it's a really impressive combination. So they really were a massive part of the success in the early days, and then even latterly. As a pop band, if you wanted anybody on board, Xenomania would be the people.
Xenomania and Girls Aloud seemed to be a winning combination, releasing tracks that catapulted to the top of the charts. And by drawing in influences from other music genres, it helped to keep Girls Aloud's style exciting and diverse.
First album had influences of the Smiths and people who are credible music artists, and it gave Girls Aloud this edge that hadn't really been seen in a boy or girl band for a good few years before that, really, and it just marked them as something a bit different, a bit new, and 5 people to look out for.
Rather than just release a cheesy one-hit wonder, which was pure pop, Girls Aloud were able to draw in influence like the Smiths, Strokes, Fatboy Slim into their songs, which just made for a really edgy sound. And it was so much better than, your Pete Waterman type of style bands where he's like, right, let's make them pop stars and, just pure cheese. Girls Aloud were really lucky in that respect. They benefited from great producers who wanted to make them current.
Girls Aloud's reputation for producing great songs was rapidly growing, and their popularity grew even more when they were heavily praised from some of the music industry's most well-respected critics.
What was great for Girls Aloud is that some serious heavyweight critics like Alexis Petridis from The Guardian said, you know what, they came from a manufactured pop show on TV, but they're really good. And so therefore he's talking to his readership who would never ever normally listen to something like Girls Aloud, but he was tapping into them, and they thought, okay, and this really breeds for longevity of career.
At the time Girls Aloud came out, people were beginning to get wise to the reality TV thing and the talent show phenomena, and I think it was all too easy then to kick bands that had come out of it and just say they were rubbish manufactured, would never last the distance, because we just had Hearsay, remember. When people like Alexis Petridis and Pitchfork Media back you, it's a sign that you've crossed borders as well. It's not just about the mainstream pop audience, it means that you've been accepted by some fairly heavyweight and respected critics.
Look at Girls Aloud, they went for a decade, became the UK's biggest ever girl band. And, it wasn't solely thanks to serious critics, but it certainly did no harm. What I think is frustrating for Girls Aloud is that they're not always given the credit they perhaps deserve. So people who read The Guardian will know that the music critic really likes them, but they still have this tag of pop. And actually they've got critical acclaim from real musical heavyweights.
Girls Aloud shot to fame after coming in second place on Popstars The Rivals, and it was a life-changing experience for the 5 girls. But people were starting to wonder if Cheryl had become the standout member of the group.
I would say it took a good few years for the public to actually consciously know who the girls were. Unlike say, the Spice Girls, you knew all the individual characters. But it's really only Cheryl who has managed to come out of it and be completely her own star.
I think Cheryl immediately announced herself as the big character in the band, because back then she didn't care what she said, which made for brilliant headlines and great stories in the newspapers. She really was the one you wanted when you were presented with the band. And I've had this all the way through my career at The Sun and on the Bazaar column. When it got to Girls Aloud, you always wanted Cheryl because you knew you would be guaranteed at least the page lead, or potentially with Cheryl you could get a front page.
Cheryl might have been grabbing all the headlines, but they weren't all positive. In 2003, she was involved in an altercation at a nightclub, and as a result, she was arrested and charged with assault.
Cheryl was, however, starting to stand out for all the wrong reasons. She hit a nightclub attendant when she was out partying, and, you know, this could have been the end of her career. The nightclub attendant went to the papers, big black eye, not good for a sugary sweet girl band.
So Toilet Gate, as it is now known, happened in my old student nightclub in Guildford in Surrey. Apparently Cheryl Cole was very drunk, she went to the loo, she came out and she tried to take a few lollipops from the toilet attendant who had them on display. Traditionally you're meant to pay, you know, donate a few pence or a pound or whatever, but Cheryl didn't, she just took them. The toilet attendant turned around and apparently tried to grab her purse or her wallet, and Cheryl retaliated. Things were said and Cheryl ended up punching the girl, who went to the papers, went to the police, and it all blew up in Cheryl's face.
It was very, very early on in Girls Aloud's career. They'd only been formed at the end of 2002, and this is January 2003. So you've got to remember that these young girls were not used to being in the public eye. And obviously that's no excuse for what happened, but an incident that she would have reacted very similar to a year before was now something that was of public interest. So regardless of what actually went on, the reaction to it was something that she had never encountered before. She says that she went to take 5 lollipops from the toilet attendant, and she, in her autobiography, she actually says that she was looking for the money to pay for it, but I believe there was some discrepancy about whether or not she was intending to pay. She claims that the toilet attendant hit her first and she retaliated. She says it was instinctively, and I think that's part and parcel of where she grew up and how she was brought up, and told if someone hits you, you hit back harder.
You know, this is a girl from Newcastle who likes a drink and is used to a wild night out on a Saturday night. Doesn't in any way make up for what happened that night, and she did serve her punishment for that crime.
The media reaction to the Toiletgate incident was huge, with many journalists branding Cheryl a bully and, at worst, a racist.
The media reaction at the time was huge. A lot of the tabloids jumped on it immediately, but obviously an incident like that, when you are a pop star, has major repercussions. I think she was very shocked by everything that happened following on. She was really hurt that it called her personality into question, and people were judging her, and people thought that they knew her, and she was universally accepted to be a racist. And obviously she was found guilty of assault, but I think one of the most famous headlines was "Girls Aloud, but she's not a racist." So even though something that Cheryl found quite positive, she was so pleased to be cleared of being a racist.
I think it's an important point to mention that she wasn't convicted of racially aggravated assault, it was just assault. But yeah, it was a tough time for her, and had that been a racially aggravated assault, I think the story of Cheryl's career would have been very different.
With so much negative press surrounding Cheryl, it was vital she had the full support of her bandmates and management team to help her get through this early career crisis.
The girls have been through so much together, they were very much a fivesome, and to have pulled one of them away after just a few months would have been a disaster, and everyone within the label would have known this. The girls themselves knew it, so it made sense to stick with Cheryl, support her, back her publicly. They just knew that they had to just stick together and make it work, which is exactly what they've done.
Cheryl actually offered to leave the band, and she said to the girls that she didn't want to drag their careers down with her. But they all said no, we want to stick together. You know, they'd come through the process of joining that band in such a public way. I think they just wanted, they developed these bonds, they wanted to stick with them. And surprisingly, Louis Walsh wasn't adamant that she left or didn't see it damaging the career of the band.
There was discussion, do we remove her from the band? And Louis Walsh actually said, no, I want her to stay in the band. So really, without him, you know, Cheryl Cole could be working in Tesco back in Newcastle.
The five girls had clearly formed strong bonds with each other, and the fact they fully supported Cheryl through this difficult time was vital for the future success of the band. The incident was put behind them, and the girls went from strength to strength. And in 2005, they released their new single, Biology, which was hailed by some critics as the track of the decade.
When Biology was released, it was really applauded for its pioneering attitude to pop. It was, The Guardian called it the best single of the decade. And it was quite a surprise to a lot of people because, again, they could have taken the easy route and released a lot of slashy ballads and done pop by numbers. But this was really Xenomania showing they loved pop, that they knew how to do pop, and that Girls Aloud were the best pop singers in the country that could do it.
Girls Aloud were enjoying their continued success at the top, but it seemed Cheryl couldn't keep herself out of the headlines. This time, for having some well-publicised and high-profile celebrity spats.
Cheryl's had a few spats in her time, but for me, the best, the ultimate one was between her and Charlotte Church. It happened, I think, 2005. They were in the Radio 1 studio. Girls Aloud were in there at the same time, and they heard Charlotte's first ever pop single, which was a track called Crazy Chick. And it led Cheryl to remark that Charlotte had kind of copied their sound from about 3 years ago, which obviously Charlotte Church, being gobby and Welsh, didn't react to very well and hit back saying, "I'll take that from you when you can sing Ave Maria, love." And Cheryl then retaliated again, and I just remember her saying at one point, "Anyway, you're not even gorgeous, you've got a fat head." And the fat head thing will always stick, I think. So these two haven't really ever patched up their differences, and to this day there isn't much love there.
It basically boiled down to Cheryl Cole having a pop at Charlotte Church for stealing the Girls Aloud sound. Charlotte Church retaliated in a classic Welsh style by having a go at her saying that she couldn't sing, and it just rumbled on from there.
So next to cross Cheryl Cole was Lily Allen, who released a single on the B-side which was entitled Cheryl Tweedy, which Cheryl initially, embarrassingly, thought was a compliment and seemed quite grateful and pleased, until Lily Allen remarked, no, it was ironic. So that initiated a falling out between the pair of those two, which rumbled on for another couple of years.
And I think there's still a bit of bad blood there, actually. I think Lily hasn't got a great deal of time for Cheryl. If you look at Lily's career, she's got an incredible mantelpiece of awards. Ivor Novello's really respected, and she's got a lot about her. But Cheryl's done well too. It's just the way it's going to be with people that are strong personalities. There'll always be a clash, and it makes British pop culture interesting, that rivalry between artists, and it would be a sad world if we didn't have that. So fair play to both of them.
At this point in her career, Cheryl was well known for making tabloid headlines. And when she started dating Premiership footballer Ashley Cole, she again found herself all over the front pages.
Cheryl and Ashley got together when she was living in North London. He was playing tennis in the grounds of her house and asked for her number. She declined, but he gradually wormed his way into her affections, and a couple months later they went public snogging at a nightclub in London. And this cemented really Cheryl's position as an A-list star, dating a Premiership footballer earning £80,000 a week. And it just gave her something other than music and singing to her bow, really, another string to her bow.
This cemented her reputation as standing out from the rest of the band.
Cheryl being seen on the arm of Ashley Cole means that she's not only the singer, but she's also an individual in her own right. She's got her own private life, and also it kind of completes the fairy tale story for aspirational teenagers and young girls growing up who think she came from a council estate in Newcastle, won a TV talent show, and now she's bagged the boyfriend. So it was just the complete package, really.
Cheryl's relationship with Ashley seemed to make her a more popular figure through the eyes of the public.
Cheryl was hugely popular by that point. I think people could relate to her because she had a personality. She was a normal girl who'd done well for herself. And I think also the combination of her success professionally and also her personality with Ashley's success on the pitch. He was picking up caps for England and was one of the star performers for the England team at the time. I think the country was ready for somebody to replace Posh and Becks by that point, and they were the natural suitors, and they slipped into that role perfectly.
As Cheryl was now dating a Premiership footballer, she became an exclusive member of a very elite club, labelled by the press as the Wags.
WAG, which stands for wife and girlfriend of a football player. And usually the connotations are very much like, you know, you don't make any money yourself, you live off his money, you love dressing in Gucci, and it's all because of him. But Cheryl got the kudos because she obviously was bringing an awful lot to the table. She was part of the biggest girl group in the UK, and they were a force to be reckoned with. Everyone wanted a piece of Ashley and Cheryl.
When Cheryl joined the Wags out in 2006 in Baden-Baden, that was really when the WAG thing exploded. I mean, the term had been used for a couple of years before, but never had it been seen to this extent. And I think there was one particular shopping trip where 6 of them spent £60,000, and that was it. They were cemented on the front pages of the newspapers. Girls wanted to be them, boys wanted their own WAG. This was, I mean, it was just a whole new thing that we hadn't really seen before.
So the Wags were out in full force, supporting their footballer partners as the England national team took part in the 2006 World Cup. But the Wags were soon to come under heavy criticism as the England team crashed out of the competition.
Well, England's demise in the World Cup was blamed on the Wags in 2006. There was a bit of a circus in Baden-Baden because a lot of beautiful women turned up to support their partners. So it was a bit of a distraction, and I think because Cheryl was probably the most famous, bar one other very famous football Wag, that I think she probably got bore the brunt of that one.
A lot of the Wags were seen to be taking the attention away from the boys out there, and when they lost on penalties, the Wags actually became a figure of hate that people decided had caused the loss. So that was very difficult for them because while they tried to go out there and show support for their boyfriends, they ended up coming home with the weight of England's loss in the World Cup on their shoulders. So that was a difficult thing to shift, and being a Wag then became a negative thing. It had negative connotations because apart from just being seen as somebody's other half, they also kind of looked like they were detracting from their other half's success.
Once the drama of the Wags incident had died down, it seemed that Cheryl and Ashley were once again the talking point of the nation, this time with the announcement they were getting married.
They got married on the Saturday at Rutland Park, a civil ceremony on the Friday, and then a big lavish do the next day on the Saturday, and invited all their celebrity friends and had a lavish banquet and champagne-fueled day and night and a massive party.
They got married at Rutland Park, which didn't have a wedding licence, so they actually had a small wedding the day before their big £500,000 ceremony, which was very close and intimate with just the pair of them and their close family. And the next day they had one with 200 guests.
Cheryl and Ashley's wedding was the UK's most talked about and publicised celebrity event of the year. Hundreds of their celebrity friends attended the lavish do, and the newly married couple sold the image rights to OK magazine for £1 million.
Well, Cheryl and Ashley, obviously being short of a penny or two, decided to sell their wedding rights to a glossy magazine for a reported £1 million.
Well, Cheryl and Ashley originally didn't really want to do a magazine deal, but they had some pictures taken of them when they got engaged that were sold to a magazine, and they felt like their private moment had been taken out of their hands, really. She looks back now and she says she kind of regrets the decision to sell her wedding to OK magazine, but at the time she felt like that would be their only way of controlling the stories about it and making sure that how it was presented was how they were happy with.
Cheryl's marriage to Ashley seemed to propel her to the forefront of Britain's popularity, and she was now known as the nation's sweetheart.
Well, with her marriage to Ashley, Cheryl became a more rounded person in the eyes of the public almost. She'd put her wild, crazy past behind her, and she settled down, she'd found the man she loved, and they seemingly had this perfect marriage. She was successful in her career, and now she was happy in her personal life. And it's what everybody aspires to. Every young girl wants to be both successful and in love, and Cheryl had it all, but was always smiley, always grateful, was bubbly, and had time for people, would chat to her fans. So she just became this nation's sweetheart almost in the space of a few weeks.
Seeing her settle down and seeing her grow up and mature and be in a relationship I think endears a lot of people to a young woman who might have otherwise thought she was a lout and maybe still accused her of being a bit gobby. This was her maturing into womanhood. And obviously Ashley Cole was a very successful player, and at that point England footballers were worshipped. They were worshipped around the country, and it was nice to see one settle down with a lady that everyone liked.
At this point in her career, Cheryl was flying high. She bagged herself the footballer husband and was part of the most successful UK girl band ever. But things were about to get even better for Cheryl, as she was invited to be a judge on hit TV show The X Factor, which propelled her fame to another level.
When Cheryl replaced Sharon Osbourne as a judge on The X Factor in 2008, that's when she became huge. In my opinion, Cheryl Cole owes her household status name, huge star, to Simon Cowell, who decided to bring her in. Now, Simon Cowell had his pick. He could have chosen any woman to sit on the judging panel. Giving Cheryl that chance really made her go from here to here, when she married Ashley Cole, to way up here, stratospheric.
She also managed to get the X Factor gig, and she was hugely successful on there, taking over from Sharon Osbourne, their big stiletto heels to fill, and she did it in style, and she really found her calling at that point. She was excellent on the show, and it really was a massive part of her career and served her very well. She won it 2 years in the spin. She brought through the winner in consecutive years.
It pretty much catapulted her into everybody's living room on a Saturday afternoon. Now they could see her every single week, and it showed a lot more of her personality. It showed a lot more of her vulnerability. It showed her crying when she was moved by a particular act. It showed her, again, not taking any stick when someone had a go at them on stage. It showed her as her.
Cheryl getting the X Factor gig was ginormous, and again marked her out as an individual. She was no longer 1/5 of Girls Aloud. She was now Cheryl Cole. She had the limelight. She was sitting next to Simon Cowell, and instantly she was a hit. She said what people were thinking. She was down to earth. She was cheeky. She wasn't contrived, and she was original and just a breath of fresh air that the show desperately needed.
It seemed the choice to pick Cheryl as a judge on The X Factor was a popular one, and it was a chance for the public to get a more in-depth look into her character and personality.
By the time she was on X Factor, she was a lot more measured, a lot more mature, and actually the way that she criticised people, and let's be honest, that's what it's all about in X Factor, the way that she gave the feedback really warmed with the British public, the way that she came across. And you know, she was very good with the contestants. You know, she is down to earth. Despite all the money and all the success, she did remain that little girl from Newcastle.
Not only was Cheryl part of the X Factor, she was, you know, the best judge there. Because in 2008, when she joined, she was in charge of the girls, and Alexandra Burke, who was part of her team, went on to win. Now that could have been, you know, a one-off. But the next year, Jo McElderry also won, who she mentored as part of the boys group. And Simon Cowell said, "I knew Cheryl Cole would be good because she speaks like normal people and the audience really relate to that." And she does. She has this amazing way of the accent, her Geordie accent is so kind of likeable that people know that she's come from humble roots. They like her, and she does speak the truth, and it really warms the nation's heart.
So for the first time we were getting an insight into her mind and her personality. And you can't fake, you know, being a judge, critiquing people. You can't do it for the whole 90 minutes or 60 minutes, whatever the show is. So people were, for the first time, just seeing the real Cheryl Cole, and they liked what they saw.
Becoming a judge on The X Factor was a career move that did wonders for Cheryl. It allowed the public a chance to see her for who she truly was. However, things were about to take a dramatic turn for Cheryl when it was revealed in many of the British tabloids that Ashley had cheated on her.
Well, when the stories about Ashley Cole cheating on Cheryl came out, it wasn't really a great surprise to anybody who worked in newspapers, because we'd heard so many rumblings of it and we knew it was coming. And I think Cheryl really was slightly blinkered at that point. And in a really horrible fashion, she started to find out all these terrible things that had been going on behind her back. So for Cheryl to read about that and find out about it would have been massively unpleasant, and not just for her family too.
In early 2008, it was revealed that Ashley had cheated on Cheryl. It came as a huge shock to everyone. I don't think anyone saw that one coming, and everyone just obviously went Team Cheryl. Ashley started getting loads of stick from football terraces, and everyone turned to Cheryl and just thought, poor Cheryl this, poor Cheryl that. I think people wanted her to leave him straight away. They could see how heartbroken she was. At the same time, the poor girl had to go and then appear at the Brits and seem all jolly and happy next to her bandmates. And I was there that year, and I remember just seeing her looking just crushed.
When he was caught cheating, you kind of got that feeling, oh, I knew he was a wrong one. Just the way he behaves, you know, he goes to football clubs for the money. And fans don't like that. So he doesn't seem to have a huge set of morals, and that really reflected with Cheryl. It's like this kid who was probably not the most popular or handsome at school, but suddenly is playing Premiership football, can do anything he wants, and even though he has the girl who's gorgeous, who every guy wants to date, who's on the cover of FHM, can't help playing away, because he's like, now I can, I will.
Through tabloid exposure, the whole nation was made aware that Ashley had cheated on Cheryl, and it was clear who the public was siding with.
The positive thing to come out of Ashley's infidelity was the wave of public sympathy towards Cheryl. She wouldn't have wanted it or planned it that way, but ultimately what happened was anybody who was against her, who remembered she was a bit of a troublemaker, in trouble in the past, kind of sat up and said, you know, how can you dislike somebody who's been so publicly humiliated? Anyone who's been cheated on knows it hurts like hell, but to have the nation watching you and seeing how you react, you know, you need a lot of strength for that. And I think people's hearts just really went out to her.
During this testing time, Cheryl was also fully supported by her fellow bandmates and took a holiday with Nicola Roberts and Kimberly Walsh to get away from the media circus that was surrounding her.
Cheryl actually went on a holiday for Valentine's Day with Nicola Roberts and Kimberly Walsh, her Girls Aloud bandmates. And I think that was a very important show of solidarity, and it just reiterated in everyone's mind that these were very, very close friends, and that the girls were there for her. And I think that's very important, and I think to this day, Cheryl is very, very appreciative of how much they rallied around her and how much support they gave her.
Despite being told by friends and family to leave Ashley after the allegations that he had cheated on her, Cheryl decided to stick by her man.
I remember reading an interview, I think it was actually in her book. Cheryl said, I made my marriage vows and I said that I would stick with him for better, for worse, and it doesn't get much worse than this. And I took my vow seriously and I decided to see it through and try and make it work.
When Ashley was accused of cheating on Cheryl with Amy Walton, she very much stood by her man, and she's since said a lot of areas of Amy's story didn't seem to add up to her. The best one being that in that inebriated state, Cheryl believes that he would have been unable to perform. She felt that made the story completely false. It was a very difficult decision for her to make, obviously in her personal life, but also in relation to her career, because a lot of women would immediately say, if your man is accused of cheating, you should walk away from him. So for her to stand by him was going to have repercussions on her career and how many people bought her next album. I mean, it's sad to admit, but that is a factor. People are then, say like Charlotte Church then came out and said that she had no backbone. And it is a difficult thing to go through in a normal walk of life, but when you're in the public eye, it's unimaginably hard.
Cheryl had come through one of the toughest times in her personal life, and it was now time for her to launch her solo career. Her first album, 3 Words, was released in 2009 and included hit single, Fight for This Love.
Fight for This Love was a brilliant song. It was kind of punchy and it was about girl power. And also it was around the time that Ashley was becoming known as a cheat. So you buy into it. You think, this girl's singing from the heart here. I'm going to fight for this love.
All you can do is make the best of it now.
I think Fight for This Love was a masterstroke. Suddenly she had this anthemic girl power track that really sort of thrust her forward as a strong woman again. So to announce herself as a great solo act with a great single like that, it really was the best way to get off on the right foot.
Fight for This Love, again, was a fantastic song and absolutely perfect in terms of propelling Cheryl into her solo career. It was also after the whole Ashley Cole infidelity stuff, so the lyrics themselves were 100 times more poignant than they perhaps otherwise would have been.
Cheryl's solo career got off to a fantastic start, and she had the help of superstar producer will.i.am to give her songs a more innovative and distinct sound.
He was brilliant for her. He had credibility, he had a sense of mischief and fun, and it's not just about the music. When you see Cheryl Cole perform, you see will.i.am's influence behind it.
will.i.am wasn't just a creative consultant, he was also a manager at that point. So I think they put together an album knowing exactly what the charts were like at the time, and it was perfect pop for 2009, and it was a success. It was painting by numbers, it was making an album to suit music at that time.
She worked with will.i.am, which gave her both international profile and a bit of credibility. It was a different sound, it was Cheryl trying to be more grown up, more adult if you like, and be taken more seriously as an artist.
Cheryl and will.i.am were becoming a force to be reckoned with. They combined for will.i.am's latest single, Heartbreaker, to release one of the tracks of the year.
Her vocal appeared on Heartbreaker, became a will.i.am Cheryl Cole single, but it also marked a rebirth for Cheryl as a solo artist in terms of the choreography, because we saw an edgier Cheryl, we saw her taking on these hip-hop moves. She's a massive hip-hop fan at heart, and she really wanted to nail that performance. She looked incredible, the video was slick, the single was a massive hit.
He was hugely instrumental in her success as a solo artist. I think he basically provided the confidence more than anything for her to pursue a solo career. He told her she was good enough and to follow her dream, and as a pair, as two people, they were quite a powerful force. They did very well together.
In mid-2009, Cheryl took some time out from her solo career to get involved in a celebrity climb of Kilimanjaro. The climb was in aid of comic relief and helped to raise over £1 million.
Cheryl really did an amazing thing for comic relief in 2009. I mean, that climb up Kilimanjaro with her celebrity friends was an incredible thing. They raised over £1 million for comic relief, but it was one of the hardest, toughest things that Cheryl's ever done. It took her completely outside of her comfort zone, be it from exhaustion, from the long hours, from the physical strain of climbing one of the highest mountains in the world. But she conquered her fears, and she conquered that mountain. 2010
was to be an extremely challenging and emotional year for Cheryl, as there were further tabloid revelations of Ashley's repeated infidelity, which ultimately led to their divorce.
Early 2010, Ashley was again accused of cheating on Cheryl. This time he was caught sexting another woman, Sonia Wilde, and this was really bad timing. She had to perform at the Brits, which is a massive, massive performance. It's massive even for Girls Aloud, so to do it on her own was really something she was nervous about. And she had to do that while she was on the front pages. I mean, that week he was on the front pages, being caught sending pictures of himself in his pants. So not only was it hurtful, it was humiliating. And to then have to go through one of the most challenging points of your career while that's going on, I don't know how she did it.
The thing that tore Ashley and Cheryl apart was his infidelity, for sure, and it wasn't just a one-off. You know, she went back to him when she found out he'd been cheating, but he did it again and again, and it was pretty lewd stuff. It was him sending, you know, his torso to a girl on his phone, kind of sleeping with girls who were kiss and tell girls or hairdressers, just anyone really.
I think she felt publicly humiliated more than anything because she had backed him and forgiven him and accepted his excuses the first time round. For it to then happen again, it was just really horrific. She thought she was going to have family with Ashley Cole, and suddenly realised that he didn't really have the same intentions and he wasn't treating her with a great deal of respect. So to have that going on in one part of her life, and then to have this huge juggernaut of a career that's very difficult to stop once it's going. You know, she had deadlines to meet with albums, she had gigs to perform. It's very difficult to stop that, so she had to soldier on, and she did that. And you know, again, all credit to her for battling through.
The difficult times were not yet over for Cheryl. After the divorce, she went on a much-needed holiday to Tanzania. Upon her return to the UK, Cheryl became dangerously ill with malaria, an infectious disease she had contracted during her trip.
I think it's fair to say that the whole malaria episode for Cheryl and her family and friends and the inner circle around her was one of the most stressful and most dramatic and life-threatening episodes in her life to date. I mean, we can't underestimate just how serious and severe her malaria was. She had one of the worst forms of malaria, parasites effectively attacking her liver, attacking her new white blood cells. She, if you remember, had to be transferred to the Tropical Diseases Hospital and had to be seen by one of the tropical diseases specialists in the UK. And at the time, her mother Joan was informed that she left it so late in reporting her condition, she could have died. Things were that bad. But as Cheryl's mum said at the time, Cheryl is a born fighter and she fought through it. And I think she came back stronger because of it. We can't really underestimate at all the impact that entire period had on her life, and it's made her who she is today.
Cheryl battled through to make a full recovery from her malaria, and at the end of 2010, she released her second solo album, Messy Little Raindrops, which included hit single, Promise This.
Promise This secured Cheryl another #1. The video was very slick, very polished, very well produced. She looked absolutely beautiful. It was quite artistic.
Messy Little Raindrops was another really successful album for Cheryl. She was able to collaborate with a lot more different artists, and I think that helped her find her own voice. And it was after she'd had the near-death experience when she suffered from malaria. So I think for her to record another album, it was a lot more personal and it was a lot more her.
With Messy Little Raindrops, you can see there's a real urban influence coming in. Now, will.i.am is still part of the creative process here, and you also had artists like Dizzy Rascal joining forces with Cheryl Cole, and you can see this girl who loves her street dancing, kind of still wanting to be that girl, who wants to be quite urban and cool and trendy, and you know, good for her that she's not just going down a ballady pop route, that clearly she's having a voice, and that voice is, I want to be a bit more gritty.
With the successful and popular release of Messy Little Raindrops, Cheryl ended 2010 on a strong note. And in 2011, she decided to venture down different paths and established the Cheryl Cole Foundation.
So Cheryl established her own charity foundation after she got the chance to meet His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles. Cheryl had been fortunate enough to attend a number of his functions where she was invited to see how the Prince's Trust had effectively helped so many young people from across the UK. Young people that basically wanted to get a chance to work in business, develop business ideas, and basically give back to the community. And I think Cheryl was really inspired by these young people and by the Prince. So she was invited to go to Clarence House. She went to meet Prince Charles, and it was there that she revealed that she was launching her own Cheryl's Charity Foundation. She was going to give back to the young people that she grew up with in the northeast of England, effectively helping them with millions of pounds raised in the first year to help young people get a chance. And the fact that she was out there promoting it in all her interviews was a really positive thing for her at that time. I mean, we were all talking about Cheryl. We watched her on television. She was the nation's sweetheart. X Factor loved her. Her career was just going from strength to strength. But this reminded everybody as to how she began, and she had to work hard. Her life wasn't easy as a child. So here was Cheryl saying, I want to give back. I want to help young people in my community. And I think actually it was a really positive thing for people to see actually Cheryl was being incredibly generous.
After successfully opening her own charity foundation, Cheryl was invited to be a judge on the American version of The X Factor, a career opportunity like no other. However, it didn't quite go as planned for the Geordie star.
American X Factor was an unmitigated disaster for Cheryl. It was, again, quite a painful thing to watch her go through because she was built up as this big British export. Simon Cowell had fought tooth and nail to bring her across as part of the show. And almost immediately they realised that it wasn't going to work. Her accent just didn't translate in America at all, which was strange that it even got that far because she had gone through test audiences and things like that. It was humiliating for her because she had to step down after 3 weeks. And only very recently has that legal case been resolved, and she took a lot of money out of Mr. Cowell for that blunder. Well, she definitely put all her eggs in one basket with that step across to US X Factor. She thought that was going to be the springboard for a huge career in America, which would have really cemented her as a huge star over there. It didn't work out like that, and she did have to come back to Britain with her tail between her legs.
Well, Cheryl landing the US X Factor gig was massive for her, and it would have made her in America. She would have probably cracked the States and would have taken her up yet another notch in the earning stakes. she was made for life, had it have worked out.
The public line was that her Geordie accent was too strong to be understood. However, we've later found out this wasn't really the case at all. It was more because she just wasn't herself. She'd obviously gone to America and been a bit intimidated and not Sean. She wasn't like the feisty Cheryl who said, "Shut up, Simon," and she just became a little bit in a shell, and it was very publicly humiliating. So suddenly Cheryl Cole was back to the UK on a flight with her tail between her legs and not really knowing what had happened.
The American X Factor incident was a huge blow for Cheryl, and it left her confidence shaken. After taking some time out of the spotlight, she was back in the studio to record her third solo album, A Million Lights, and she teamed up with producer Calvin Harris for the album's lead single, Call My Name.
Call My Name was the lead single from A Million Lights. It was a Calvin Harris produced pop song, and Calvin could do no wrong at the time. He just had a massive global hit with We Found Love with Rihanna. So he was really hot property. So it was a major coup for Cheryl to be working with him. And the song did fantastically. She did a lot of performances of it, and it went down really well, and the album sold really well.
Calvin Harris, as a producer, has had an incredible run of form. So for Cheryl to work with him is almost a ringing endorsement of her talents, I suppose you could say. And Calvin knows that he's going to have a #1 hit if he gets Cheryl on board. And they were a good combination, you've got to give them that.
In 2012, Cheryl's third album, A Million Lights, showed what she could really do again. Call My Name was a brilliant, brilliant song. It just stood up for every girl. It was just like, when you call my name, I'm not going to dance to your tune. And it was punchy. She looked brilliant. She always looks great, but she still had this kind of like urban look going on, and clearly she was calling the shots.
After the disappointment of the American X Factor, Cheryl was most definitely back with a bang. She had a renewed confidence about her, and it wasn't just her music career that was heating up. As rumours started to circulate, she was dating one of her backup dancers, Trey Holloway.
So Trey was one of Cheryl's backing dancers on her UK tour, and obviously behind the scenes they became friends, they got close, something developed. I mean, who knows how long they'd been dating secretly, but they did eventually go public. Trey and Cheryl went out for dinner, they got photographed, and very, very quickly, in a matter of weeks, Cheryl was saying it's love and gushing about her man in a way that she never really did with Ashley, so it was all quite interesting.
So days after Cheryl partied in Amsterdam with her best mates Kimberly and Nicola from Girls Aloud, we finally had confirmation that her relationship with Trey had come to an end. Apparently they split in June of 2013. It was the long distance that was causing the problems. The two were always apart. He was working in Los Angeles, she was in the UK. Distance didn't help that relationship, and unfortunately after 40 months, they called it a day.
It was now time for Cheryl to switch her focus back to Girls Aloud. As in 2013, it was announced that the band would be making a comeback tour for their 10th anniversary.
Girls Aloud mentioned in passing one day that they would do something for their 10th anniversary. But it was great to see them all get back together, and Nadine especially had been living in LA for a long time. And it was nice to see that they were all still friends.
Touring is the best thing about what we do, full stop. So to be able to go out and to just say thank you to the fans for 10 years of support, you know, that's a special feeling.
I was at the press launch when Girls Aloud announced that they were going to be coming back 10 years on, and it was greeted rapturously by fans. There was a lot of excitement on Twitter, on the internet, and it was a sign of how popular they were in their heyday, really, that there was a clamouring and a need to see them live 10 years on.
After a successful comeback tour, Girls Aloud announced on their Twitter page that their tour was to be their last, as after 10 remarkable years together, they had decided to split up.
Well, the girls said after announcing their split in March that they were always going to split after this tour.
Girls Aloud have called it a day. That was a shock and a surprise to many fans. They called it quits on Twitter. One tweet and Girls Aloud was history.
For Cheryl and the girls, it was the end of an era. So the question now is, what does the future hold for Cheryl Cole?
Now it's all about Cheryl, the solo artist, and she's established herself as a major player with will.i.am's backing and with some incredible producers and writers around her. I think we're going to get a very strong solo album from her, I think in 2014.
Cheryl's next move is really important for her. Simon Cowell definitely wants her back on the US X Factor. It would be interesting if she took it. Some might think it was a step back, some might think she should probably snub him and not return to the show that so famously dumped her, but it would catapult her into the US. It would be very good for her career.
Ultimately, she wants to become a mum. She'd love to be married again, but whatever happens, she is already one of the most successful and famous women in Britain. The press love her, we love her photograph, the media go crazy for her. So whatever she chooses to do next, I think she'll always be successful.